Dominique O'Rourke, thank you so much for joining us again.
Thanks for having me.
Uh, First, you missing city council business? You haven't been there for a couple of weeks, you know? You missing it yet?
So I love the issues at City Hall, and anybody who knows me knows I work really hard to get to the bottom of the agenda items. And so I do. I feel a little bit of FOMO, but I'm also a person who focuses on the task at hand. And so I took an unpaid absence. It's interesting, but it's you cannot take leave from council from an elected position. And legally, I could just not show up for 3 months. Until leave is required, but I wanted to be really transparent with people. And so I've stopped taking a salary for the duration.
All right. I appreciate that. And because we're just talking about how you are well experienced in political stuff, so I want to kick things off with like a really hard question, which is I've kind of seen Mark Carney in his several weeks as prime minister now. Um, I've seen him cap or repeal the consumer carbon tax. I've seen him repeal the capital gains increase. I know which one of those has benefited me more. So I just want you to assuage my fears for a minute that Mr. Carney, as prime minister, if he's elected for another term, is not going to be taking us back to a time when it was like deficit hawks, neoliberal economic stuff, that a lot of the real progressive stuff like expanding the social safety net, pharmacare, dental care, childcare, attacking climate change, really attacking climate change, isn't going to go away, and we're going to go back to like the salad days in the 90s when we saw a lot of downloading, when we saw cutting budgets to get to budget surpluses. Can you assuage me of that concern?
Absolutely. In fact, I don't have to. Mark Carney wrote a book in 2021 called Values, where he outlines, how the market should serve people and not the other way around. There's an entire chapter on climate. And so he's very aware of the climate challenge. He was the UN Special Envoy on climate and finance. So I believe that the repeal of the consumer carbon tax just makes way for other mechanisms where really the financial markets, we incentivize corporations from reducing their emissions, and we are keeping the cap on industrial emissions. And so I believe that Mark Carney is looking at how we support workers. Initially, I think it was through the transition in AI. In his book, he was talking about that, but it's all about how we support people through the transition, how the economy should work for people and not the other way around. And so the book is basically divided in three sections. The first being the economy and how we've decoupled the price of something from the value of something, and that we should restore that, that there are things like our environment that even if they're not costed, have value, and we should value and protect that. And we've seen great announcements this week on environment. The next part is all about climate, about how it's real. So, I mean, we know the next prime minister is going to be a liberal or conservative. We know one believes in climate change and in taking action, and we know one does not. So there's that piece. And the third piece is on SDGs, social development goals, and it's also on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Those are liberal values, and those are Mark Carney values. And we're seeing in the policy announcements a reduction in taxes for the middle class. We're seeing extension of dental care, which is part of the social safety net. There's announcements in terms of expanding and maintaining the $10 a day childcare. Here in Guelph and Wellington County, the cost of childcare, regulated childcare, has gone from $35 a day to $22 a day. That makes a huge difference in terms of affordability for a household. And so I think that we're looking at a number of measures on affordability, including on housing. So I think what we're seeing here is integrative thinking, that we can do many things at the same time. And in fact, the shift to green energy is a huge opportunity for trades, for investing in Canada, for managing our own affairs and being less reliant on the United States. So I don't read the repeal of the carbon tax as being moving back on climate. In fact, it's the one piece that was causing a lot of division.
Mm.
Removing that allows us to move forward with the other climate initiatives. And we've seen some of those this week, including some Indigenous control over water, which I think is terrific.
Let me attack that a bit deeper because I think the Liberal government before the election earlier this year was like responding to the fact that the carbon tax had sort of become a political cudgel. You and I are wonks, so we live and breathe this stuff. But I think for a lot of people, the word carbon tax, or words, I guess it's two words, there was kind of a massive misunderstanding of that, and I think the Liberal Party lost a lot of political capital standing up for it for years. And I guess it does that not create mixed messages when you're out on the campaign trail and you're knocking doors? It's like, well, you guys finally admitted it. The carbon tax is bad. Is that not a political issue for you as you campaign?
Well, look, I'm a new candidate, right? So I don't have to apologize for for the previous governments. I will say though that it's not that the carbon tax was bad. And you've got 200 or 300 economists who say this is a good tool. And we want our government to be listening to us. And then when they do, we say, aha, you have reversed your position. So I think it is acknowledging that for some Canadians, the carbon tax was very divisive. And if that is going to tank the rest of the agenda on tackling climate change, then we need to listen to what we're hearing. We need to listen to people in rural areas for whom it was particularly problematic, where a switch to heat pumps or electric vehicles was more challenging.
Hmm.
And so I think that is responsible government. At council, people come and delegate, and we're expected to hear their perspective and appreciate that and modify policy accordingly. And I think that's what we've seen. And,
Mm.
I will say the latest reports on emissions show that Canada has our lowest emissions in the past 27 years outside of the pandemic. So the Liberal climate plan is credible, it's working, and there's more to come.
Okay. You touched on something I do want to address too, which is you're in an unusual position in that you are asking the voters to send you to a government. I mean, it's a different leader, so you could say it's a different government, but a government that's already in motion. And I guess what are the benefits and challenges for you as you're applying for this job? What are the selling points when, being the new kid, wanting to be the new kid on the block, when the I guess the gang is old, let's say.
Well, I don't know that the gang is old, because there's certainly new leadership. And I would say the context has changed. And so, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, we were not under attack by the United States, a direct attack on our sovereignty and on our way of life. These Trump tariffs are going to hit Guelph very, very hard. There's 16,500 jobs that are directly related to manufacturing in the city. My own home has been impacted. My husband works in manufacturing in Kitchener. And so I think the context has really changed in terms of the choice for leader, and it's a different leader. So we want serious, responsible government in Ottawa. We want someone who will stand up to Trump, to fight for our sovereignty, to push back that we'll never be the 51st state. We have seen a change in tone from President Trump with respect to Prime Minister Carney. And for me, my council experience, so I've chaired infrastructure development and environment. Previously, it was economy, for 4 years. So I really understand. I'm a champion of manufacturing. I've supported small business. I really understand what the impact here will be. And I know that when times are tough, people turn to government. We see it right now. People are saying, please support us. And Mark Carney has said that he will do that. And so for that, you need a government that believes in responsible public service, that believes in supporting people, and that's not going to, give you a tax cut and wish you luck. And I would say you need a government that can do multiple things and recognize that we have multiple challenges at this time. And those are the attacks from the United States and the threat to our economy. And I said manufacturing, but in Guelph, we're very vulnerable on agribusiness. and the Conference Board of Canada says we are the most vulnerable city for a change in GDP. And the Canadian Chamber of Commerce has us fourth most vulnerable um, in terms of highest exports to the US per capita, right? So
Hmm.
I'm acutely aware of that. We need to tackle that. At the same time, the planet does not care who is president or prime minister, but we know that we need to continue on climate action. And at the same time, because that's, on the horizon for some people, there is the daily question of cost of living and affordability. And I believe that under Mark Carney's leadership, the government is taking steps to address all of those. And if I can talk about housing for a second,
Yeah.
we Guelph received $21.4 million for the Housing Accelerator Fund. It is helping us speed up approvals for housing. So we know we have a target that is imposed by the province, and that's fine. We have a supply challenge. Pierre Poilievre has said he will cut that funding. Pierre Poilievre has said that any city that doesn't meet its housing targets will not get its infrastructure funding. That's a direct download onto your property taxes. So, I'm the development charge person. I'm on the peer review committee. I read the full report. So, this attack on development charges without making cities whole, which is what Mark Carney's plan has said, is a direct download onto property taxpayers, 100%, because we can't build housing without the sewers and the sidewalks and the street lamps.
I kind of want to get to that municipal to federal
Yeah.
pipeline in a sec, but just to address the other thing you kind of mentioned, which is there's, and we saw kind of a bit of this in the United States in their election last year, that there's people are kind of two minds. They know that we kind of need long-term planning, but the immediate concerns kind of override things. And I think you know that from your council experience. I know that certainly watching council business, that sometimes you're making plans that have like 20, 30-year time horizons. But people are like, yeah, but I can't afford a house today.
Right.
And in terms of like juggling that, not just the trying to juggle responding to the immediate while also planning to the long term, but also juggling people's expectations that they want sort of immediate action, even though some plans that were laid out by Mr. Carney, by Mr. Trudeau, and their respective governments kind of have a longer term plan. How do you juggle that? And how do you make people, I guess, patient or understand the need
While
for
fending
patience?
off the US. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Actually, what I really like about how the platform is coming together for the Liberal Party is that some of those long-term goals, specifically energy transition, right? Specifically infrastructure. So how do we become less dependent on the US is by investing here in Canada. But part of that shift, how we get to cleaner energy, how we get to being an energy powerhouse, is investing in trades. So that is immediate support of people, immediate support of jobs. We're going to need so many jobs in home building, infrastructure. And so the city's going to be ready with shovel-ready projects, right? Because that stimulus is going to come, but it's to an end. And so there are ways to accomplish multiple objectives at the same time. And I would give the example also of defending the Arctic. So, people think that, a candidate a leader flew to the Arctic and makes a decision. But the public sector has been professionals in the public sector have been looking at the Arctic and saying, what would help us with Arctic sovereignty, involve Indigenous people? What's going to help us solve multiple issues at the same time and invest in those communities? And so there's really thoughtful policy making going on.
Hmm.
That's certainly for people who believe in good, responsible government, like the Liberal Party. That's good policy making. For somebody who respects a professional public service, that's good government.
Hmm. Um, to address the other thing you mentioned, which is, you know, you're an experienced politician, but this is a big change.
Yeah.
And in terms of like the inputs and the outputs, as a city councilor, you can run into your constituents just out and about. I mean, you represent Ward 6 still, technically, even though you're on leave, which is one of the bigger wards. in terms of population size, actually in terms of actual size too. But um, you're going to run, or if you win the election, you will assume the position of MP. So that's even a bigger thing, a bigger riding or ward,
Mhm.
whatever you want to call it, with even more constituents. But also, there's a distance because you'll be in Ottawa, not necessarily in Guelph all the time. How are you preparing for that transition, especially also on a policy level where, as a city councilor, you can sort of see these things in motion directly in your own backyard, but also when you're an MP, you're thinking locally, but you're also having to think about impacts nationwide, and you have much less control over what directly impacts Guelph.
Right. So first, the service piece. So every MP still lives in the riding, right? Still comes home weekends and when the House is not in session, still available by Zoom, phone, and their staff. So the MP's role in Ottawa is not, we have this image that it's just sitting in question period. It's not that. You're in parliamentary committees, you're still taking constituent calls, you're working on different issues. So there is a presence of an office in the riding. There is availability of the MP, right? Personally, in the community, I'm always in the community, and so that won't change. I really love meeting people where they're at, and I like being out in the community. So that won't change. And one of my goals when I became a counselor was to improve communication with people. So I've sent 105 newsletters and to a list of 900 people every single month, often more than once, to keep them informed about what's happening. So I'm really quite available. And I will have more support as an MP for people in the constituency. So I don't see that as being a challenge at all. I mean, we're on Zoom right now and we're in the same city, right? Um, in terms of seeing things in motion, I do want to really honor Lloyd Longfield's contribution to Guelph. So during his tenure, he mobilized $500 million of investments in this city. And so those are investments at the University of Guelph. That's $50 million in terms of affordable housing for seniors, support for shelters and supportive housing. And so I think that you do get to see how things land. When you look in the city of Guelph at our electric buses, at the Greener Homes program, that is a federally funded program, there are a number of ways that we see the federal government, the Housing Accelerator Fund that now has grants if you want to add an additional residential dwelling unit, a basement apartment, or a tiny home. Those are tangible government programs that land in our city, and they land in terms of affordability, and they land in terms of climate. So I will be eager to deliver on those. We saw $170 million investment at Linamar to transition to EV.
Hmm. You brought up Lloyd. I didn't, but it does make me wonder. You would be the fourth Liberal MP in 33 years, if my math is right. And if that's the way people decide and the way people vote, I think that is fair. But in terms of your style and what you want to do, how are you going to set yourself apart from your predecessors? Whether that's Lloyd, whether that's Frank, whether that's Brenda, um, how do you want to leave your mark as an MP?
Well, I think again, it's the person who meets the moment, right? And so you say, well, it's been 33 years. Well, the issues have changed. The leaders have changed. The MPs and what they bring to the table have changed. And so I bring a lot of municipal experience. I understand how policy lands in the city. I understand, some of the challenges. I also have, I did exist before I was a city councillor, so I have experience in the private, public, and nonprofit sector. I'm a small business owner. I've written national reports on youth, art, belonging. I've worked with the Canadian Index of Wellbeing, and so I bring a different lens of service to this moment, right?
I can confirm you existed before you were a city councilor. I think you were on the Politicast before you were a councilor. Um, so fair enough. Um, I want to ask you this question, which I've been asking all the candidates. I mean, we've touched on a lot already, but if there's like an issue that is like important to you personally, professionally, that you want to tackle before the election is over? As you're cleaning up the campaign signs and filling out all the Elections Canada forms, what is it that you don't want to be kicking yourself that you didn't get to talk about this more?
Um, well, actually, so you mean cleaning up some
No, I mean just like
municipal
an
work?
issue wise, like it could be municipal work, like maybe, I don't know, what is it you in terms of like campaigning on issues that you don't want to sort of leave on the field, as so to speak.
I think when we're talking about affordability, I think it's really important to come back to some of the measures that we need to protect. And that's the Canada Child Benefit. That's the childcare expansion and funding that really makes things more affordable for families. I was very pleased to see Prime Minister Carney yesterday recognize femicide and start talking about intimate partner violence. And, I brought forward a motion to council to recognize intimate partner violence as an epidemic. I think there's a potential to exacerbate that with uncertainty and financial challenges or potential job losses in the city. And so, all the more reason to have robust supports in place and employment alternatives. Um, so, I think there's such a diverse range of issues for people. I don't want to choose just the one, but I do want families to see the supports that are in place that are potentially at risk. For seniors, the last Conservative government rolled back the age of eligibility for OAS and GIS. And by Liberal government putting that back to 65, it raised hundreds of thousands of seniors out of poverty. And similarly, the Canada Child Tax Benefit has supported hundreds of thousands of families, dental care, pharmacare. So I know healthcare is on the minds of many, many people. I would point out the federal government has announced historic increases in the transfers to provinces, and that the province of Ontario has the lowest healthcare spending in the country.
Hmm.
So we do need, people don't like finger pointing, but there are constitutional responsibilities um, that we need to uphold.
Yeah, for sure. Um, you kind of walked into this one, but are you going to miss city council work if you not we're not talking like it's a fait accompli, but I mean if you
Yeah.
get elected, that means, leaving one Carden Street behind as a city councilor. Is that what do you think about that?
I certainly will miss my colleagues and staff, and I'm going to miss the direct delegation, right? So when you look at Queen's Park and you look at Parliament, the House of Commons, the public can't come and delegate, right? But you can at City Council, and I think that's a special thing. I love having classrooms, newcomers, Scout and Girl Guide groups come to City Hall and do their debate. I really like engaging people directly in democracy. So I will miss that. And there's no question that it's been a wonderful experience. And my best moments on council are when I can really connect somebody with the right service or person to make a difference. So that service won't change. The hard work won't change, but of course I'll miss it. And it's been an honor to serve Ward 6 and the whole city of Guelph. Um, and so, I am not presuming anything.
I was going to say you might still be serving Ward 6 still.
Absolutely. And absolutely. And it will continue to be my honor to do that. Right. And we serve the whole city. Like we have a lens for our ward, but we serve the whole city. And so regardless, I have always served this city as, on the Guelph Community Foundation, when I did work for Special Olympics Spring Games. So whether it's council or a board, or if I have the opportunity and the honor as the MP, it will continue to be about service for people.
Hmm. In terms of what you think, and I will admit my skepticism about Mr. Carney as a politician. Um, but I think he's still kind of an unknown quantity. I think people are looking at him as kind of like an antidote to someone who is on the news every day in the White House. But in terms of what your expectation for him is as the ongoing prime minister, um, what should people expect from Mr. Carney from what you've seen?
Right. So obviously, we expect experience because while he doesn't have experience necessarily as a politician, he has experience addressing crises at the Bank of Canada, at the Bank of England. He's worked for both conservative and liberal governments. So his expertise is not in question. He has expertise in the private and the public sector, which should be seen as an advantage of really understanding the real world and markets. That will continue. When François-Philippe Champagne, the Minister of Industry and now Minister of Finance, was in Guelph to announce $170 million for Linamar for their transition to EV, I had a cup of coffee with them. And I have a master's degree in leadership, and I was looking at the leadership race potentially from a colleague point of view, right? So it wasn't just
Mm.
about the prime minister, but as a colleague. So I asked him, do you think that Mark Carney will be listening to his ministers and to his caucus? Because that means something to me to be a strong voice for Guelph, and to what extent will that resonate in Ottawa? I'm no wallflower, as you know. Um, and François-Philippe Champagne said that already Prime Minister Carney is really listening to his ministers. And Prime Minister Carney has run large organizations before, right? So I think, and in his book Values, he talks about transformational leadership. He talks, so this is, I think this is in his DNA. And we want we want a prime minister who's not a politician, but then when we
Mm.
have an opportunity to have a prime minister who's not a politician, we're not sure we're comfortable with that. But, it's not about one person. If you look at the bench strength of the cabinet, there are very smart, experienced, capable people there. And you look at the bench strength of the caucus, and we don't know what that, caucus is going to be. It's all the
Right.
MPs elected. These are people who have been leaders in their community who want to serve. And there's real value and strength in that. There's also an entire public sector of deputy ministers who are experienced, right? And so I think it is about, if we want serious leadership, it is about data-driven decisions, navigating complexity. And I think certainly navigating complexity, Prime Minister Carney has done that.
All right. Well, we will see what happens in the last couple of weeks here. But Dominique, before we let you go, the most essential question we can ask you is, where can people learn more about you and your campaign?
Thanks so much. So if people want to reach out, you can visit dominiqueforguelph.ca, and that's it's a long handle, Dominique, Dominique Forguelph.ca. And if you want to volunteer, you want to join us, we're knocking on doors. Those conversations are amazing, and I'm very grateful to people who've shared what's on their mind with me.
All right. Well, we appreciate you sharing your mind with us, Dominique, and good luck to you on the campaign trail. And we will see what happens on April 28th. Thanks for coming back on Open Sources.
Of course. Thanks, Adam.